kind of making a quick jaunt around the SEC, around the Capstone here, looking at the other sports. It's really good for sports people when the other sports at Alabama are making conversation or make you have some conversation. I know that Alabama is clearly the big dog, James, when it comes to football in the state. But is Auburn making a case for being the best sports program in the state? Are they making a statement that while they have not been able to topple Alabama, is this run in sports for Auburn athletics? I heard this. I was thinking about this, and then I guess it was confirmed when Slade, a offensive lineman for Auburn, he says we're the top program when it comes to baseball, basketball, and then he even threw in equestrian.
Of course.
But hey, we have an equestrian program now, right? We're coming. Hey, Auburn, your equestrian program is not safe from the Crimson Tide because, in the famous words of Coach O,
we're coming.
There we go, baby.
We're coming.
Alabama's equestrian program.
And we ain't backing down.
No, seriously. Seriously. No, but seriously, the Auburn fans who are beginning to tout that, are they in a position that they can start touting being the best sports program in the state? Or is Alabama slipping in the major sports, or all around, is Auburn better than Alabama? If you had to vote right now, is Auburn athletic program, especially when you consider the big three, is the Auburn Tigers a better program than Alabama?
Right now as a whole, Martin, if you talk about as a whole.
I can't turn your volume down, man. I was trying to turn you down, James. Don't say it. Go ahead.
As a whole, they're definitely making a case for it.
Yeah, so of course, we're going to always talk about football, but let's kind of talk about it. Okay, is what Auburn did this year enough to catapult them that far ahead of the Tide? Because only a few years ago, they were not any better off than Alabama. Okay, and they bring in, of course, Bruce Pearl the year before we bring in Avery, and 2 years ago, everybody forgets 2 years ago they were about to fire Bruce Pearl. I think that's what it is. See, their thing is if they about fire you and then they don't, you come back really good. Isn't that what happened with Tommy Tuberville? Yeah, okay, yeah, he goes undefeated the next year after they had Flightgate. So I'm sorry, I was just having too much fun with it. But seriously, Auburn makes it to the Final Four in basketball. Is there as big a gap in Alabama basketball in Auburn basketball as it appeared?
I think a lot of it just had to come down to coaching. It really did. I just think Avery just did not develop the players like Bruce Pearl did.
Or did Bruce Pearl buy his players?
That could be the case.
I mean, seriously, they were about to. Is Auburn okay? Here's the question: in 2 years, 3 years, if you were betting, would you bet on Alabama or Auburn basketball right now? Considering everything that's going on right now, considering everything that's going on with Alabama and Auburn, would you bet on Auburn or Alabama right now?
Aubrey and me went out and saw practice last week, and we have the video up of our practice session that we shot at our Tide 1029 YouTube channel. So, 2 or 3 years, I'm telling. This may be having the crimson-colored glasses on, Martin, but if Nate Oates fulfills what he seems to be doing as far as putting his work sowing the seeds for what he wants to see in the program, then Alabama could catch up with Auburn really, really quick on the hardwood.
And the question becomes, the question on this follow-up question of that is Is it back? Is Auburn going to be back with the pack this year? Was this an anomaly with Auburn, or is Bruce Pearl and the Auburn program and the Auburn players, are they legit? Remember, they lost Harper, Okeke. I mean, what was the little point guard name? Little man, he didn't get
Bryce Brown.
Brown. I mean, they are Harper and Brown. The other one, Harper and Brown. I said the opposite. And so losing those three, along with Wiley, and is Auburn going to be back in the middle of the pack of the SEC again? Is Tennessee going to be middle of the pack again? You know, so is Alabama as far off as we think? Could they get the juice just right? Don't forget that Alabama does have a guy. By the way, we didn't know at the time when we were on there, but Kyra Lewis, actually we knew it. I just forgot to mention. I should say that the other way. The Thursday it was announced he actually made the team. He's making the trip to Greece as a member of the U.S. under-19 team. That exposure, that playing time is only going to help Alabama and help him be a better player. So is there as big a gap as we think between Auburn and Alabama? It's yet to be seen, but
overall, Martin, I believe if we're just looking at this straight from talent-wise, I don't think that's far of a gap. We had an extremely talented team last year. Teams, we could never just finish the job, it seemed like. Yeah, that was our big issue.
It was always, in conditioning-wise, is going to be a strength. What was a weakness last year, and I think this roster is more talented at Alabama than last year's roster. So I'm not going to fall in love with conditioning and great media clips. But if he transfers what he did at Buffalo to Alabama, then Alabama has a chance in basketball. So it appears to be this great gap between, but maybe not as far off as you think, because I think Auburn's going to fall back a lot. I don't see Auburn being a perennial Final Four team. I think Auburn's going to be working their tails off next year to make it to the NCAA tournament and to get out of the first round. I think Alabama, if things goes well, that's their expectation too, to make it to the tournament and fight to get out of the first round. So I think these two programs are going to be in the same. As far as baseball, what about baseball? Baseball is one of those sports where I think it's a lot harder to get out of a hole. You have such limited players, you have such limited opportunities to change, and is the SEC baseball, SEC West in baseball, is it tougher than what we saw a few years ago in SEC football? I mean, remember when we used to say the SEC West was the toughest division in SEC was the toughest conference and the West was the toughest division in the toughest conference? Is that true, or even more true in baseball?
The game of the century year, you had at one point, Alabama, LSU, and Arkansas 1, 2, 3 in the national polls.
Yeah, and then Auburn was always sitting there waiting. I mean, so it is absolutely crazy. But is the baseball better? Well, how can this baseball team solve the riddle? I mean, how can you come from behind when everybody else can offer more scholarships than you? The state of Mississippi doesn't have a lottery, but they give, I forget what the name of the program is, but they give out-of-state players a break on tuition. Alabama can't do it. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not for lottery, and I'm definitely not for lottery just for baseball. I think the NCAA is stupid in their administration of 11 point whatever scholarships. I'm sorry, and I may get in trouble for this, and this was before Me Too movement. This thing about trying to have equal scholarships for males and females, it's ridiculous. There is a sport in men's sports called men's football that there is no equivalent for women. So you should not punish all the other athletes that happen to be males for that reason. Now, if you wanted to come out and say, okay, for football, since there's no male equivalent, we're going to say that there's 40 scholarships, and we're going to give that many to women. The other 45 should not be counted in making this Title IX thing work. There is no reason, and I can say this as an African American, but all my white co-hosts, they can't say it. They ain't gonna say it. They're not gonna say it. Baseball is seen as a privileged sport today. It's seen as a predominantly white sport on the college level, and I think that has something to do with the number of scholarships that are offered.
Ron Polk told Wimp and Barry that about 3 years ago, the exact same thing you said as far as the 11.7 scholarships limiting the opportunities for people and basically making college baseball a sport for upper middle class and rich people.
That's exactly what it does, because the reality of it is it's just crazy to think that you have to try to fill the roster of 20, not from a standpoint of nice to have, have to have 25 to 30 players to be good. You have to have at least 25 to 30 players to be relevant, to be good in college baseball. And to only have 11 scholarships and not be able to fully get them there. Tim Redding, who's has kids that plays baseball and played baseball, and his dad played baseball at Alabama, and his dad was in the pro, says they have to offer some full rides to get some good players. The problem is when they do that, they face the same situation the Lakers are facing right now. The Lakers got Anthony Davis and lost their whole bench. So now they have to figure out, do we go out and get one more good player and have no bench and try to make it and pray we don't get injured? Or do we go out and fill it up with a bunch of guys that are just bench fillers? And that's where Alabama is. If they start offering full rides, yes, they're going to get some home run hitters, but the problem is they won't have enough pitching, or they won't have enough depth in other positions. So it's really, really, to me, the NCAA need to just change it and bump up the scholarships. Like I said, it's not football's fault. It's because the way they count football scholarships in the Title IX situation. And basketball almost gets all of its scholarships, but baseball, you have to have almost as many pitchers as you do scholarships.
I think it's crazy. They got to split these scholarships, too. So it's not like these 11 guys, they're going to pick out of 11 guys to get full rides. They've got to split the scholarships up.
Right. And so when you're talking about splitting them up, and then a kid in state, in a really good player in Alabama, I tell you what, let's get the break here and carry that conversation over, because here's the thing, and it's about opportunity. It's about what's right. And I think that Title IX is missing this one when it comes to Division I, because a state should not be having conversation around a lottery just for the sake of college baseball. And that's one of the big proponents that people can push. Alabama's surrounded by all of these lottery states and other things. We just need to look at this. We'll continue the conversation on the Blitz on Tide 102.9. Back to the baseball conversation. As I was saying, Alabama baseball has an uphill battle. They play in the toughest division, but C.J. Watson said it's the best division, but then the most likely national champion is going to come from the East. So both divisions are tough. Both of these divisions are tough. And 4 or 5 years ago, Vanderbilt was where Alabama was. Maybe, probably 4 or 5 years ago, they were where Alabama was. Correct? I mean, they were not. It may be a few more years than that, but in recent years, they've gotten really good.
Oh, I'll just put it to you this way when it comes to Vandy baseball. Growing up around here, late 90s, Alabama baseball was practically where Vandy is now, and Vandy was where Alabama is.
Yeah, and I say 5 years, but in the last 5 years, they've been really dominant. They've had the best player in baseball, in college baseball, and now they've had one of the better teams for a couple of different years. National champion recently, and probably looking at a possibility of getting another one. So that's baseball. But can Alabama get there? Like I said, you'll never hear me say, hey, we need a lottery so baseball can be good at Alabama. And you'll never hear those words out of my mouth. And I'm going to tell you, Alabama we start this conversation off talking about Auburn being the best program in the state. Not football, basketball, but overall, are they the best program in the state, especially when it comes to Big Three? Well, they just made it to the College World Series. And if you go back and watch, could have and should have won more than they did in the College World Series. They had unforced errors and mistakes that cost them. So the question becomes, how did they do it? They don't have a lottery. How did Auburn do it and get there? And they were close last year, so it wasn't a fluke this year. They were close last year, and then they matured a little bit, got a little better, made some nice plays down the stretch, made some bonehead plays down the stretch, but they made enough to get in and make it to the College World Series. They had enough pitching. So what's their recipe? Why is it that they're able to do it and Alabama hasn't?
I think it has to be a two-pronged approach. One, developing your talent, proving that you can develop your talent once they get here. And two, in-state recruiting. That's because with the lottery scholarships for some of the other states, like Georgia and Louisiana and Florida, just to name a few, you're at a disadvantage when it comes to recruiting, especially the better players from those states, when it comes to getting them basically having to pay out-of-state tuition, some out-of-state tuition when it comes to coming to Alabama, whether it's to play for the Crimson Tide or the Orange and Blue on the other side of the state. So you have to rely, and hopefully you can get a lot of quality in-state players, and then you've got to develop that talent just to show recruits that you can have a chance, especially if they have dreams of going to the next level, of being able to develop their talent.
And one other thing, and you may have mentioned it, if you did, I didn't catch it, but one of the things that Auburn did is they picked up the right JUCO players. They got some maturity, and the key is what gives me some excitement. Some hope for the baseball program is Bohannon was the key to that Auburn program. I mean, Bohannon was the guy that you were talking about, James, that got that talent, because it's twofold. You can get all the best in-state players you want, but if their talent level isn't good enough to get to the next level, you can be the best developer in the world. If there's just not enough talent in the state, it's just not enough talent in the state. And so that's one of the questions I have. Is there enough big boy talent in the state of Alabama? Okay. So that's question number one. And Bohannon did a good job with Auburn of getting some of the in-state talent, James. They developed it. Now, the question I have is, who's the developer that was on that staff? Was it the head coach? Was it Bohannon? Was it other coaches? And does Bohannon have that within his program? Number two is, the eye to see a guy who only has a couple of years left in baseball. Bohannon has shown that he could do that. He's been the one that helped build Kentucky. He was at State for a little bit, but helped build Kentucky, helped build Auburn. So can he bring some of that magic to Alabama? Ed Posey said next year on Facebook, he said next year is his third season. It's time to get it going. He also came back and said Alabama's done it before, so it can be done again. Gaspar should have been run off a long time ago. So that's one thought there is next year the key year? Are you ready to say that next year's a year he needs to get it done? Let me see. Someone else, Tim Redding said Goff left the program, the baseball team like Jimbo left Florida State. Ouch. So if that's the case, do we give Goff? Are you expecting Goff to have this team ready next year?
You bring up Goff. You know he actually got another Power 5 conference head coaching job at Purdue just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. He has a certain style, and that style did not work here, but it worked where he had been before he came here. So it doesn't surprise me that he got a job. It just didn't fit here. And what he was trying to do here. And maybe he learned. Maybe he's changed. I don't know that. But is it fair to say year 3 for Bohannon is the year he should get it going? Is this really year 3 for him?
To me, I say no.
Do you give him an extra year because of the way he came into the program?
I think you may have to give him an extra 2 years, with the overall condition of the program that he inherited.
Let me ask you this: when you look at, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm with James. I think you give him an extra 2 years. I mean, he came into a dumpster fire of a program.
Yeah, and and the other part is the question becomes, he not only the program wasn't in great shape, the morale wasn't great, the talent wasn't great, and the way he got the job was, it wasn't like he had a chance to recruit, and then some of the players they got ended up not staying. So it was not a great situation, but the statement was made, Alabama's done it before, they can do it again. Can they do it again in the current climate? And if they can, how do they do it? I mean, if you had to build this program, how would you do it? Because the difference is when we were having those great runs in the late 90s and early 90s and mid 90s and all of that, James, there wasn't we weren't like what they call it when you're landlocked. We're landlocked when it comes to recruiting because every state around us, with the exception of Mississippi, has lottery. But
Mississippi will be getting a lottery pretty soon.
Right. But they don't even need the lottery to beat Alabama in recruiting right now, because right now they have a better program. And if there's a kid in down the west coast of Alabama, the west side of Alabama, and Mississippi State comes knocking, Mississippi State says, hey, you can come here like you live in the state of Mississippi. So there's no difference in being in the state of Alabama and the state of Mississippi when it comes to tuition. So not only are we landlocked, we're also landlocked, but we're more expensive for anybody that wants to come from those other states that are game changers. They're already being recruited by their in-state schools. And we're going to say, if you come to Alabama, we're going to charge you more to play here, and we can only give you a partial scholarship. So it's tough. So my thought is the way he builds the program is this. He has to get a couple of key JUCO players and pitching. If I'm going to offer full scholarships, I'm going to offer the full scholarships to the pitchers. I'm going to get me I'm going to go out and try to find a couple of ringers. I'm talking about wherever I can find them, anywhere in the country, and sell the University of Alabama and give those guys full rides. Then I'm going to find a couple of JUCO guys while I'm waiting on that time for the state of Alabama talent to believe in us. I'm going to go get a couple of JUCO guys. And let me see, Tim Redding saying they picked up a couple of development JUCO players. At that, Goff tried to cut the whole team. We all remember that. But Tim Redding said, Bohanna has landed some very big players. The only downfall to baseball is they went in the draft out of high school. That's the other part that beats it. When you go out and get those types of players, you now have to hope you hold on to them, because if they're good enough that they can change your program on the college level, they're also good enough to get drafted by the Major League Baseball. So it's an interesting dilemma. And I'll close with this, guys, and we get the break here. What's success for Alabama over the next 2 to 3 years? How would you deem success next year and then for the next couple of years?
I think getting to the SEC tournament on a consistent basis would be a great first start for Bohannon.
So I think consistently, but what does that mean? When does he need to get there? And over the next, if he's the coach here the next 3 to 5 years, how many times does he need to make it? And when's the first time he needs to make it?
It would help him getting to Hoover next year, but I would certainly think within 2 years this program needs to get to Hoover.
So you're like me. If he makes it next year, I think he's on schedule to ahead of schedule. Based on the
schedule.
Yeah. Because I don't count that first year, man. I'm giving him some benefit of the doubt. Like, I didn't count Mike Schuler's first year because of the way he came in. I did not dog Mike Shula for the first year with the way he came in. Okay? And I feel the same way about Bohannon. I don't think he necessarily had a great opportunity to be successful that first year. This year's team was improved. Even though the record didn't improve, and you can't always – the record didn't improve, but we saw that the SEC was a better league this year. Okay? This team a couple years ago makes it to the tournament. It's better than the teams that made it to some of the previous tournaments. And I close this. Tim Redding says go with JUCO pitching and get you a couple of scholarships is what I say. Ringers. That's what you have to do. You got to get – and Ed Posey says this. You better build a team up the middle. Pitchers, catchers, middle infielders, and center fielders. And I say you start with pitching and go from there. So, anyway, it doesn't hurt to have a couple of hitters. Anyway, he has an uphill battle.